Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello everyone, welcome back to NPTEL online course on research methodology for planning and architectural studies. So now we are continuing our discussion on research writing. So in our previous lecture we have discussed about the need of research writing, the components of research writing, and also we discussed in detail the various steps of research writing. So with that we continue to the next one, that is lecture number 10, and the topic is research writing part 2. So in this particular lecture, we'll learn the common mistakes in research writing that normally we do, and this is something that I have observed as a supervisor, have observed as researcher, and also as reviewer of many such kind of journals and good conferences. Then we'll discuss a very important and pertinent topic in the writing, that is about the similarity and plagiarism. Then I'll also give you some tips for good research writing, and also I'll give you very basic idea how to select a good journal to publish your result. So if we start discussing about the common mistakes in research writing, one is definitely the insufficient background information. When we start writing, okay, we are very much familiar with our own research, our own findings of those kind of information and data, but at the same time it is important to start your write up with the background. Definitely whenever your section will come, like your result discussion, your database survey, it will be of all your own work, but before that you should start with the good background, that why you picked up this particular research topic. If it is clear, then you will be very much in comfort zone, because that will make a nice flow, that why your research is important and why one should read your research. Then lack of clarity in objectives, as I mentioned in earlier presentation, just in the part 1, that the objective should be clear, okay, achievable objective. And many a times we'll find that there is a lack, there is no clear indication, and it is very open ended. So if the readers or the reviewer will find it difficult to find out the objectives, so then definitely that will put a negative impact on the overall evaluation. Unclear research questions or hypothesis, that the objective is not clear, even if your paper is saying some sort of hypothesis, that is also not clear, or what are the questions that you are going to answer, because this research gap through the background information, research questions, then the hypothesis, they are all interlinked. If there is a lack, then that is also some sort of mistakes in the writing. Then other thing is that neglecting to define terminologies. This is again a mistake. Sometimes we just assume that the readers or the reviewers will know all this kind of terminology. If there is a predetermined defined terminology, it's better that you just write it there. If there is some sort of short forms that you are abbreviation that you are using in your text, there should be a list of abbreviation, or wherever it is some kind of theory oriented research, so you define it with proper citation. Poor literature review, that that's why I said in the previous lecture that some of the journals, they make it almost mandatory to have a separate literature review section, because many a times we just make that section very weak in order to just say some of the research, and there is just nothing but the reporting of the past literature, not any critical analysis of it. So that is also some sort of problem and mistakes. weak methodology, that it is not very clear that what this particular research is trying to do, what is the objective, what type of data is used, what type of sampling is used, what is the rationale behind choosing the method that being used in this particular paper. So this overall methodology, if it is weak, that will lead to a poor writing, and then in all such cases the end result is that it is not going to be accepted very easily in a good journal or conference. So that is not the objective as a researcher. The other part is that about the writing, and where many a times we write so many things but it is creating some sort of ambiguity. In this case, again, how it is different from a English essay writing or any such kind of narration. So here it should be very crisp and very clear what is actually you want to do, or you want to speak, or you want the reader to understand. So there should be very clear statement about it. There should not be something, adding some kind of extra material before and after to make it bulky. It is not required. And at the same time, nowadays all the journals, they are limiting their research paper, within 5,000, 6,000 words. So it is also very challenging. If you don't make your things very crisp, to the point, and if you make it ambiguous, so probably you'll be losing something somewhere in some section which may be very important for your research to consider. Next point is underestimating the importance of editing. That this is something, just we write the draft and then we think that okay, let us submit and let's get the review, then we'll do the refinement. It will not work in most of the cases. So you need proper editing of your write up in terms of language, in terms of flow, in terms of overall representation, balance between text, figure, tables, proper citation and all. So that is very important, and people do mistakes here. Many a times we overemphasize the quantity over quality. So the writing quality should be improved. It's not like I write the 50 pages and then the thesis is say 300 pages thesis. But if that can be very well written in a very concise form in 150 pages, people will love to read it, because unnecessarily not related information, irrelevant information are not required. Similarly, for a paper, we should also think on that. It is not just we put all the graphs, all the tables which we don't explain. Okay, we just like assume that the reader will understand everything. So whatever you are going to explain, whatever is very relevant to your paper, that you need to pick up. How to take a call on it? Definitely, as a young researcher, you may get this thing confused. So for that, definitely you should read more papers of your domain and then see that what are the important components the other scholars who have published in good journals they have done. You can interact with your seniors, you can interact with your supervisor, obviously, because that is something will, based on discussion, you will decide that this content can go, this content probably it's not very relevant to this particular paper. Inconsistent formatting, that is something normally happen when you write the papers in silos, that you write the introduction section and after say 2-3 months you start writing the other. So there might be some kind of inconsistency in the overall writing, the formatting. Then the other issue is the data representation. We should not put both like a figure, say you want to do some kind of analysis and want to show the frequency. So you suppose, say for example, you write it say in percentage somewhere, and then use a pie chart and the same information you give in a bar chart, or maybe in a particular graph. So that is not required. Don't make the repetition of the same information. Select the best representation technique. If it can be represented by text only, use text. If it requires graph, use graphs. If it requires tables, you add tables. Many a times we make the sentence very complex, and that is very common mistakes. Even when I started writing, one sentence is almost like 3 4 lines. So that is something like maybe we get confused with the complex sentence, compound sentence, and then it is very difficult to you know read it. So make it very simple, break the sentences in a very simple form without losing the essence. If you require two sentences instead of one complex sentence, go for it, but don't make complex language which will make poor the readability of the paper. Inadequate proofreading. So this is something it requires patience, because many a times after doing a excellent work, when we write our own thing, so we have certain belief that everything is written correct, and then probably we don't have the patience to find out those mistakes that I can do. And definitely if I am checking my own write up, probably it will be very difficult. Now for such kind of proofreading, there are tools available, but be aware of those tools, and you should not get addicted to those tools. Suppose if say something is available to check the grammar, overall sentence, nowadays there are certain kind of attraction towards the AI generative tools which can rewrite your text and all. Probably you don't get accustomed to it, because probably that may do some kind of refinement in your writing skill, but that may lead to some other dangerous situation that we are going to discuss in subsequent slide. So make it simple. Once you write a paper, take a break, then you start reading it as if that you are reviewing someone else's work. If you can have a trust to your colleague, you can ask that. You give it to your supervisor will go through, because it is the ownership of the research whosoever involved into it, so they should take the responsibility to review it. Okay. Then failure to revise. Many a times like we just assume that okay, this particular problem, maybe let's go for it, and then once review will come I'll see. So that is not a correct approach. You should revise if you find certain kind of anomaly or certain kind of issues in the write up. Then the wordiness and the redundancy. So this is something we keep on writing. So wherever like for a single argument we keep on writing so many sentences which may not required, and for that the only check is that if to state one argument you have 5 sentences, you remove one which you think that maybe this is extra, and read the whole argument once again. If meaning is unchanged, so that means the additional thing which you removed is a correct removal. So try this so that you can confine it and you can make this correct. Other thing, many a times we ignore the feedback. Okay, this is something we also need to be very much open ended. Suppose I ask my friend to read my papers and then say ki, it is not really good, it is having so many mistakes, it is not saying this kind of thing and all. Listen to that particular feedback. If some of the feedbacks are within your purview, within your scope, so then better you implement that, better you revise your paper accordingly, rather than just sending it, because maybe that particular remarks will again come in the review. Okay, so that is something we need to do. Overlooking limitations, that we don't define the limitation, which is very important, and then when you don't write any limitation, expectation is endless. In that case definitely the reviewer can argue with what you have not done. Rather than that, if you confine the limitation, you can always make argument what you have done, and the question will not be raised what you have not done in your paper. Other part is the ignoring ethical consideration, that if you are doing a research where ethical approval is required, and if you have not taken it and if you have not mentioned it, so it is not good for the scientific community. So it will not be treated as a good practice, and rather it can lead to some other bad consequences of rejection of your candidacy and other things. So it's better to be very much transparent and focusing on the ethical consideration. Ignoring the audience, say for example you are writing a paper for a conference and the conference is on certain kind of policy. Suppose you are doing some kind of planning studies and then the target audience is the policy maker and all. So in that case, whatever, like you may have done a quantitative study with lots of statistical analysis and all. So maybe looking at the audience, you need to bring those kind of inferences out of that kind of analysis. It should not be just show to the community all this, a plus b plus c etc., which will not really be very easy to follow for by the audience. So then that is something you need to also see. One of the major issues, which is the plagiarism, and then the other one is the dependence on artificial intelligence, AI generated text. So what are the different threats in that scientific research? So this is definitely, if you use that, so there will be some kind of plagiarized items. So what is plagiarism and all, I'll discuss in next slide. It may lead to the misinformation because it developed with certain algorithm which may not give the correct findings or result. I'm not saying that you should not use it, because that is something again be very orthodox and against the flow. You can use the AI, but you have to be alert enough that okay, it's not that whatever you are getting from AI and you have the complete 100% trust on that particular application. It may also go for the image duplication and manipulation kind of thing, because it can generate the thing. So then you have to be very alert about it. Then tampering the results, so this is again another challenge. So you should not indulge yourself into this. And then many a times this is a new kind of change. There is long debate on that. AI tools as co-author, that writing part you leave it to the AI algorithm. So that is also something debatable. There is long debate. So we'll discuss that in some other lecture in detail, but you should not have full reliance on this. It is nothing but simple. I can give you one example. Like earlier in our childhood days, like we are taught how to calculate the numbers, right? It's different tools and techniques that verbally we can add up 3-digit numbers, we can multiply. But now the moment, like maybe in some higher school and all, when we get introduced to the calculator, so we get used to it. And nowadays probably for a simple calculation, we don't do it manually, or we don't put any pressure on our brain to calculate it. We simply use the calculator, and now it is available with our smartphone, so we just do it. So that means it's nothing like to have more dependence on such kind of tools, which may lead to some kind of bad impact on our thinking ability, our calculation or calculative ability. Many a times we ignore the journal or conference guidelines, which may lead to a desk rejection. So we have to follow that, okay, whatever the write up I have may not be exactly the way they want, any journal they want. So we have to modify accordingly. It may be the referencing style, it may be the section numbering, it may be very minor changes, the line numbers of the paper. So better you should go for this. So ignoring that may also be some kind of mistake. Inadequate citation of statistical results. So the citation is inadequate, outdated, or wrong citation. So in all such cases it is not a good idea to go ahead. Not revisiting and updating citations. So this is what I am saying, that just few moments ago I mentioned that referencing manager can help you out to properly manage your references. But at the same time, what is happening, that if you don't update it, suppose you remove few paragraphs, along with that you remove some of the citation in text citation, and then maybe you don't update or refresh your referencing manager, the list of references still will have those kind of citation, in-text citation we have just deleted. So then there will be a mismatch and we don't have the check. So before submission of the paper, these are some mandatory check that you need to do, that the in-text citations are duly cited, or giving all set of references at the end of the paper. Now coming to this topic called similarity and plagiarism. So if you just search in Google what is plagiarism, so it is the act of copying another person's idea, words of work, and something that has been copied in this way. So that means definitely when you do literature review, you read papers, you also like some of the argument, you can use that argument in your paper, but you give citation. You should not claim that is yours. So issue is that. Now similarity is something where you have write a sentence which is similar to another sentence. So in that way, like everything we write, that is having those kind of alphabet A to Z's, right? So in that case, A to Z, or all the words that you write in your paper, they are all in dictionary. So is it the plagiarism? No. But when you write some kind of sentences, one sentence, it cannot be exactly same with another, unless otherwise it is a law, it is a particular definition, it is not. So whenever it is a law, then also you have to cite that whose laws is it is, or if it is some sentence that you would like to quote unquote, then you give that particular reference, and there are different style how you can do it. So without informing, without acknowledging, if you take someone's work and then try to portray this is mine, is the act of plagiarism. But similarity, it may be similar, but in that case if it is properly being cited, say for example you are writing a review paper, so you would like to develop certain theoretical advancement, so you want to quote certain kind of theory that has been given by some earlier researchers and all, so then there will be much more of similarity in the content. But if you don't cite them, then that is act of plagiarism. So what are the different types of plagiarism? It may be verbatim copying, exactly copy paste. I write a paper and then probably I submit it to some some sources, or I just upload in some kind of website or forum, and from there somebody copied the same thing and publish it. So then that is the copy paste kind of plagiarism. Next one is the paraphrasing without attribution. So many times it may happen that okay, it is not exactly copy paste, something is written in active voice, I just make it in passive voice and I convert it, I just make certain changes, so that is also plagiarism, unless otherwise we quote it, cite it. Even using someone else's idea, it's not only the writing part, even the idea. In a lab, maybe many people they're working, and then I just steal one idea somebody has developed first, and then I claim it is mine without acknowledging, that is also act of plagiarism. Submitting someone else's work, so this is again a very challenging thing, and that's why I also give you some sort of advice. Just make yourself safe from putting your research in some unauthenticated conference, or maybe some kind of uh, paid journal, or maybe which can promise that will publish your research in 2 days and other thing. So there most of the cases is very challenging, and many a times there may be a chance of data leakage. So try to refrain from putting your work in those kind of thing. Patch writing is something where it is not exactly the same word, but I also add some word in between. Okay, it's not exactly the paraphrasing, but I add some say word in between to break it. So without acknowledging, again it is plagiarism. So acknowledgement is important. Self plagiarism, this is also, you cannot neglect that you have written a paper, your next paper you take up the whole introduction from your last paper, that is also not right. Okay, you cannot do that. So this is another. Collusion is very, unethical, where like in a laboratory you are working together with your collaborator and all, and then you so all of a sudden just make a patent or try to file a patent and submit a paper, get a publication without acknowledging your collaborator. That is also the collusion. Ghost writing, okay, the this particular term is very interesting. The ghost writing is something that somebody has contributed to write your paper and then finally you don't give the authorship. So that is something called the ghost authorship or ghost writing. So in that case it is not right. If somebody contributes to your work and your paper, so you must give that particular authorship. If the work is just limited to certain component where it is not worthy to give the contribution as author, you should also acknowledge. So that is something also required. Many a times incomplete citation, that you just give some idea, it is actually given by Mr. X, and then you cite it is given by Mr. Y, and maybe Y doesn't exist or Y is someone else who never work in the area that you are referring. So in that case also it is leading to, even you think that okay, I have cited the thing, but actually it is not the proper citation of the statement that you quoted in your paper. So to help this out here, definitely there are many a times, you if you think that okay, our write up is similar but that is unintentional, so there are different kind of software. Okay, many institutions they have that software, or many journals they have their software to check, and it will show you the similarity index. It is not showing the plagiarism, because similarity is that okay, it is something from the internet source, it is something from the website, something from the unpublished thesis. So it is researchers job to identify. It is the supervisors also responsible to check that particular findings, that why it is similar, or is there anything that okay, this is the uh, issue of this particular high similarity, and then try to rectify it. Now if you say that okay, uh, what percentage is most common questions by the student, what percentage plagiarism is acceptable? So ideally it is 0%. Obviously there is no tolerance for plagiarism. Now for the similarity, many institutions they set up different thing, okay, depending on the content, because many a times in those software, this is just a text mining algorithm that they do, they just match it with the other internet sources and other published document, and for that many a times there is some kind of very obvious wording, right? So say for example, table 1 represent that. So this is some sentence which is being shown that it is similar. So for that there are certain kind of set rules, that how many words that you can consider, what percentage you consider. So different organizations, different institute, different journals, they will have certain threshold. But for plagiarism it is zero tolerance, and then the consequences is something like banned on authorship, retracting paper, etc. Now tips for good research writing. So start early. It should not be in hurry that okay, I have only 1 month time or 1 week time, I have to just write a paper and submit. That will be something where you will be under pressure, and then you will commit the mistakes that we have referred. There should be a thorough literature review, and normally the researcher they do it at the beginning of their research activity, so that the gaps are identified well in manner. Well defined methodology, so that you should not look back to the methodology once again and each steps you are getting confused. So well structured methodology can give you a direction and you just follow it. Stay focused on the main points, don't get diverted with the other things. Logical structuring of the paper, that what sequence that you are going to follow. You may not have literature review section, you can include it in the running text in the introduction. You may not have a proper method chapter, because depending on the research type it will depend. Adherence to the guideline, that where you are going to follow. engaging writing style. So then you should acquire this. Maybe you are very good in English writing, but in technical writing you are not really confident. So no worry, you can practice it, and with the practice you can write it well. Maybe in one go it will not possible, but after several trial definitely will improve your technical writing. If you think that you are not good in English, which is much more of official thing in most of the journals, so you start reading it. More you read, more you write, it will be good for you, and then someday you can definitely write a good research journal. Now the next thing is that the logical transition between sections, that if you have sections like introduction, methodology, method, database, data analysis, discussion, there should be a smooth transition. So each section will complement each other, that where you say that data is collected and it will be further analyzed with this method, and the results are discussed in the next section. So like that there should be some synergy, clarity and conciseness, that there should not be any ambiguity, effective use of figures and tables to make a balance. It should not be very monotonous, because there is some kind of visual appearance as well. If you have like the text one after another, one after another, and it is very monotonous, and definitely in some cases if it is not possible to put certain figure, it's not that you create some hypothetical figure and put it, but where it is possible, break it, you add certain tables, and then you discuss. Normally by the rule that you first mention about that table and figure, and just immediate after you put that particular table. It should not be something that you mention about table number 1 in the page number 2 and that table is somewhere else. Many journals they ask your table and figure separately, that is a different issue, but in general when you write it should be in that sequence. So the discussion should be in that sequence, that first you discuss the table 1 rather than table 10. So those kind of arrangement that you need to do. Then thorough data interpretation, it should not be just reporting the data which is already there in the table, but you should also explain it. Then mindful citation. What particular citation? It's not that randomly I picked up this particular thing. So in this case better you cite while write. So follow this, like it you will not forget. Rather, like what is happening normally, that you write the entire manuscript, after that you try to feed the citation, and then you will commit the mistakes. Maybe it is not appropriate, maybe you can avoid that citation, you can get a better citation. So for that you have to keep updated. Ethical consideration, that if your research needs that, please do that. Okay, it is going to help you, it will also save you from some sort of other complicacy, if it will for find some kind of discrepancy in later stage. Peer review. Okay, it is always wise that the paper that you write, that before putting into the journal and all, have a check, you check yourself, you can ask your friend whom you can trust upon that he or she will not put it that work as their own. So like in that case you can get it reviewed, and you can get it reviewed with your teacher, your supervisor, and then finally when all of you are satisfied, then go ahead for the submission. Then revision and editing, give time for that, so that time is very important, that you have to give proper time. Then in that case consistency in formatting, practice writing. Okay, there is no alternative to it, right? So maybe your first draft paper in your research career may undergo with 5-6 revisions by your supervisor, but the way you learn it, maybe tomorrow when you get your degree you will be guiding your student, you will also find this kind of discrepancy, and that way you can do it. So for that you just practice writing, rather than just thinking that okay, I don't really need to think about writing, I can depend on the AI generative text. don't do that. That is my advice. Be concise, whatever your argument, make it clear with single simple sentence. Don't make the sentence complex to increase the difficulty in the readability. Stay informed. This is something, keep on changing the guideline of the journals. New methods are coming into picture of the same domain, so you have to get updated. Your citation should get updated. Suppose you started your literature review at the beginning of your research career, first 6 months, first 1 year of your PhD career, and then when you are towards end after 3 or 3.5 years or 4 years, then that time, within this particular window of 2 years or so, I'm sure that there will be some papers which might be useful for your paper or your work. So you should get updated, so that you should not get one argument or remarks from the reviewer that okay, you have missed out some important recently published document. Stay away from plagiarism. So the best way of doing it, you write at your own. If you look at the other papers and try to just get some information, and if you find that that language is very good, let us just take it and make some modification, then unknowingly, and when there is time constraint, if there is a pressure from supervisor that submit the paper and all, so you do these mistakes, and that will lead to a very dangerous situation of retracting paper. And recently, like you might have seen that this kind of things are happening, a huge number, the number is increasing because people are now going for some kind of fast publication, huge number of publications in a year and all. So probably that is not the good idea. Proofreading, there is no alternative. Once the paper is written, give a break, as because you have written it, it will be very difficult for you to identify the mistakes, but you give a gap and then just review it again, it will help you. Okay, now important aspect, that is selection of appropriate journal. How to select a good journal for my write up? For that, first you need to read the scope and focus of that journal. It is normally mentioned for any good journal, it is very well defined. Then impact factor and reputation. So normally if the impact factor is higher, okay, so impact factor is normally a calculation where a particular journal getting citation over a time divided by total number of published document in that particular journal. So by that we get that if the impact factor is higher, that means that particular journal is being cited more often in that discipline. And the reputation, so impact factor is one of such criteria, but rather than that there are other few criteria that also you need to consider. If it is high impact journal, definitely the expectation from that particular journal is also high. So you have to assess your work, that whether like you achieve that particular level, that you can compare your overall content with the published document, you can try. And for me, definitely you should try with the base journal, but yes, a self assessment is also equally important, so that it will not really waste the time of communication and all. And there is another index or matrix, you can say, called quartile, the Q1, Q2, Q3 journals. So this is something like there is some sort of subject category. Suppose the subject is planning, so all such kind of reputed journals, they put into the JCR or the journal citation report, and based on that they give a rank. So the top 25 out percent of the journals total listed into that subject is called Q1. Next is Q2, like this. So obviously top 25 Q1 is definitely much more desirable, and you can always try to it. Then also you need to see about the open access versus subscription. So this is something, many journals now go for open access, that will have different kind of perspective. When you go for open access, your publication or your research will be visible to anybody. So in our previous lectures we discussed that probably those who are in good institution, they have good access to the journal because it is subscribed by that institute, but for others who cannot subscribe, for some of the developing countries and other institute, probably they do not have the fund to subscribe their journal. For open access they can get it, so there is some cost associated with that. But at the same time there is a difference between open access and also the paid journal. So we'll discuss that in a separate lecture, that what should be our stand. And subscription based is just the way you want to publish. Then the advantage of open access definitely, as because it will be accessed by many regardless of the subscription, so there the chances of getting citation will be more. Then publication frequency, that it is yearly publication or each month they are publishing. So based on that you can also see the process, review process. Many journals they have this kind of disclosure, that how it will go, how much time they will take. From first it will go to the handling editor, then reviewer will be invited, then this is the process. Or else the other thing is that you can get this kind of feedback from your seniors, your co-researcher or your supervisor. If somebody has gone through that phase, probably guide you better in that. Acceptance rate of the paper is how many paper are submitted and finally accepted. And definitely whenever you see that the journal is in Q1 or impact factor is high, acceptance rate is also little low. So that means it's need very good quality of your write up. Indexing and abstracting of the services, so in that cases whether it is cited in a social science index SCI journal, or it is the scientific other kind of indexing like Scopus indexed, or it is Web of Science indexed, or it is something also like art and humanities citation index, or there is a new category called ESCI, emerging science citation index. So like that there are different kind of database and indexing, which is also some sort of requirement. You may check with your institution that for your research degree and all, what is required. Is it Scopus index, it is the Q1 Q2, or it is SCI or SSCI, so that you can decide on this. And another important part is that even if I tell you all these tips and how to select it, you also need to go to the author guidelines. Mostly all the journals they do have this in their submission portal. So there you go through that, what are the different guidelines, and then is there any formatting style that you need to follow, what are the documents checklist that you require to submit your paper, so you can follow it. Copyright policy, whether it is open access or what type of copyright that is there, and then you can do. Online presence, that how much it is visible, whether your journal is having online submission or it is just some kind of hard copy, that is a published book or something. So normally if something is online, it will have much larger visibility and much more publicity. Also you need to check about the journal's target readership. So in this case journal readership will help you to target your journal, whether it is the application of such kind of planning strategy, or it is just hardcore progress in planning which will help only the planners. So that way you can decide. Journals geographical focus, many journals they focus developing country context, anything is very particular to the European context. So by that you can also get to know, okay, whether my work is relevant to this journal or not. Then the other part is the journal's openness to interdisciplinary work. As because the planning and architectural studies many times is something like interdisciplinary work, so you should also check that with the journal. Say there is some journals called like in the energy policy, or sustainable energy. So in those cases it is multidisciplinary. So if you are working on some kind of building materials which is energy efficient, you can put it. If somebody has done some kind of e-vehicles, fuel, alternative fuel, that can also lead to some energy related things, so that can also go there. So you can check that in the journal site. Feedback from colleagues, that their experience with journal and how much time they are taking, so that you can get. Journals accessibility and visibility, so whether it can be very easily available, so that you can look into it. It can also relate to your open access. If it is open access, so visibility will be more. Publishers reputation, so normally some of the publishers we are very much aware of, say Elsevier, Wiley, Springer, and Taylor and Francis, Nature. So these are some common thing, but there are n number of publishers. If you have that kind of information about the reputation, transparency, that is very important, that there would be a proper documentation. It is an online submission, you get a mail that this paper is submitted, so all the timestamp is very important. That's why I'm saying that if you get some kind of preparatory journal which is a paid journal kind of thing, you upload somewhere, you don't have much acknowledgement, so that may lead to some kind of data leaking and all. That is not good. You can also make use of the journal finder, some of the publishers they have. And another important aspect that is based on my own understanding and finding, that in your paper you have given certain kind of citation, look at that, the frequency of the publication, that okay, if most of your paper or maximum, say you have 40 citation altogether and out of 8 10 is from a particular journal X, so that means your work is much more related to the work published in that journal X, so you can target that journal as well. So that is something you can always work on. Now here is something that I just talked about, journal finder. So again, what you need to do, you have to give your title and your abstract, and that is why I'm saying that your abstract should be very well defined, all possible keyword, the basic findings, implication should be there, so that it will help through that particular algorithm, that it will suggest the suitable journals. And then once it will suggest, you should go through those journal and check the other things, the impact factor, time, review time, okay, that publication time, then geographical coverage, other all this particular checklist, and then finally you select a call. So like that you have it for say Elsevier, you have for Wiley, and you have for Taylor and Francis, and this is useful. Even I also got certain kind of help from this in some of the cases, like to identify the broad few journals, and then I checked it. But it doesn't matter much, like maybe you select based on whatever it is showing the first preference, you can always go for the second preference, and it will not guarantee your publication. So that is something that okay, if journal suggester is giving you something, is just based on whatever you have written in your text, and based on that kind of text algorithm and all, it will show you some of the options. But it is your discretion whether you will go with that or you just neglect each of them. So it is something a useful tool for the researcher. In this particular case, I am going to show you that how to check a particular journal. So in this particular case, you can see that a journal which is written on the tourism aspect. So I heard about that, or maybe in my paper I have seen that tourism management is the journal. So this is the page where you can get the overall impact factor, and then this is very important, that okay, the first decision can come very early. So I will get to know about that, okay, whether it will be relevant to that journal or not. Then the 80 days is something that the first review, so it is quite good. Then when you click on that particular thing, then you can also see the high impact factor, you have this particular first review date, you have the overall review time, the total review time, because after a review you will get some revision, you revise it, you submit it, so it will be something around 6 months 7 month thing. And then the publication after acceptance is also quite good. So for all such kind of cases, the indexing, everything is mentioned here. So for all other journals also you have to find out, maybe the interface is different, but you can take a call. So it is something where I can also see that this particular journal is having very high impact of 12.7. So next is that I have to go to the guideline to the author. Guide for authors, here you can see that the paper, then what are the contents that you have in this particular case, right? So you have this particular declaration, different checklist. Also it will talk about the different kind of author contribution, because nowadays it is very much mandatory. Then it talks about the open access, right? So again it is having some kind of word limit for different type of research. If it is something case study, so it is 7,500 approximately. So these are some of the standard information which will help you. So rather, like when you have a targeted journal, so you arrange your paper accordingly, it will really help you in terms of saving your time and selecting an appropriate journal. Then if you can able to do that after analyzing all those things, looking at the focus and aim and objective of the paper, then definitely you have to wait for this particular review to come. Many a times we just put our journal, our research paper to a journals, just looking at say impact factor or just looking at the journal title, not understanding this particular scope, and then we end up with some desk rejection and all, some kind of frustration and other thing. But yeah, it is a part of the whole process. But as much as detailed work that you can do on searching the appropriate journal, that will increase the chances of getting your paper at least the review. After the revision, then definitely if it is worthy of publishing in that journal, so it will be published. So that is the whole process that you need to follow. Now this is time to summarize it. So I think that this particular lecture gave you some nice insight, the common mistakes and how to rectify it. Then definitely some important aspect that you should be aware of about the similarity and plagiarism while writing your research. Then tips for some good research writing, and definitely like these are very few very common tips that I witness, or maybe this is whatever I am practicing to tell my student to follow it up. But there might be other few points that also you can mention in the forum. Then the selection of appropriate journal where we can submit our research, and then this is the process. And again definitely doing a research, making a good case study or adopting a good method will only be successful if we can able to publish our research in a good scientific journal, and that will have a credibility in our academic and professional career. So with that we end up with this research writing part 1 and part 2. And then the one of the topic that we just mentioned here, the need of a proper literature review. So we'll have our follow up lecture, that is the basics of literature review. So with that, thank you for joining. Hope this course is giving you some good input, and with that we'll be meeting you soon.